Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Spiritual Fitness. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today with your host, Vaish, veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. Spiritual Fitness is a program dedicated to exploring the timeless texts and practices of Bhakti Yoga for people who want daily wisdom and spirituality. You're close to 20 members on Zoom and close to 50 members watching us on Facebook. I have Shweka helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome to Spiritual Fitness. You're on mute.
Thank you very much, JM. It's good to see you. I'm really happy to be back here. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. We have a little time together, but in the tradition of the wisdom texts that I've been studying for many years, there's the story of a king named Katvanga who was very busy throughout his life. He was a warrior, and he received a benediction that he could have anything he wanted. He had worked for some very powerful beings, and they offered him a benediction. So he said, I just want to know when I'm going to leave my body. When am I going to die? And they looked at their Apple Watches and they said, you've got about a minute left. He's famous for having taken advantage of that 1 minute to attain self-realization and perfection in his life. He was so focused and intense. Of course, we don't want to wait till the last minute, but we can do so much within a moment. And according to the great philosopher Chanakya Pandit, who wrote in Sanskrit many different wisdom aphorisms, the most valuable asset that we have is our time. In fact, he said that you can't buy it back with millions of gold coins, even if you squander 1 second. Money you can always get back, and money comes and goes. Time goes, and when it's gone, it's gone. So I thank you all, because there's a million other places you could be. You're very busy, all of you, I know. And you've chosen to be here giving your attention. I've also said previously that giving attention is the best thing that you can give anybody. It's the greatest gift, because that's all we really have. Everything else is on loan. But the quintessential and essential aspect of ourselves is our consciousness, and our consciousness means our attention. So where we apportion it, where we decide to place it in any given time, as we say, where attention goes, energy flows, is also a sign of our value system. So thank you again and again for being here today. I'm going to talk a little bit today about why we're always okay. It's good to know, right? Because oftentimes it seems like maybe we're not. Maybe things have gone askew, and there are a lot of reassuring instructions given in the ancient wisdom texts that I've been studying since I was young. For those of you who I'm just meeting for the first time, I know some are joining for the first time today. My name is Vaish. I come from California, but I had kind of an unusual upbringing. My parents were both academics, but they were very liberal. And when I was young, I was kind of naturally a seeker. I wanted to know what the purpose of life was, specifically why we had to die. That was a conundrum for me, why we would go to so much trouble building things, getting all kinds of education, and then leave it all behind suddenly without warning. And no one could really answer me until I found the wisdom texts, some of them in Sanskrit that I studied carefully when I was younger. And in my teens, I decided that what I wanted to do was to study it full time. So I became a monk. And that meant living the life in an ashram where I just gave my full attention. I did that for 13 years, from the time I was 16 to 29. So I spent that time of my life studying Sanskrit and the ancient literatures and practicing the tenets of bhakti yoga. My teacher was named Bhaktivedanta, and he taught bhakti yoga. So After that, I caught up with a few things like going back to school and starting a business. I got married. I still live by the same principles, and so does my wife. So we've integrated those principles into our lives. It is not necessary to be a renunciate. And in the line of monks I was in, there was always an option to also go into so-called secular life. But and there's also a line of monks who make a permanent vow and say, like, I'm going to stay in this ashram situation for the rest of my life. I took an off ramp before that. So what I try to do is bring this integrated knowledge to this program. And that's what I'm going to do today, and give a few thoughts about ways in which, as we're busy, as we're working in the world, as we're interacting with other people, which is oftentimes a challenge in and of itself, and with thinking about, well, what's going to become of me, we can actually get some balanced practices and ideas, or practices for balance and ideas that help us really to understand how we're always okay. And every day is a compartmentalized unit. Every second actually is also, but oftentimes I race ahead and I'm thinking about the future, what might become of me. And I forget, hey, buddy, you're here right now. What's wrong with the present time? What's wrong with the second that you're in right now? What's wrong with here and now? So we'll talk about that a little bit, and a few idea bridges that have been passed down in the form of lessons from nature, which is a nature that is, or we could just say the world is full of lessons that when we aim our intelligence, when we have the purpose of refining ourselves, we can take lessons from the world at every moment. So that's a preamble to what we'll be doing today. JM, did you have any other points you want to make before I go into a meditation or anything like that?
No, we are good. As mentioned, there are quite a few newcomers, so I welcome you all to the Spiritual Fitness Program. And at the end of the session, we'll briefly introduce the 21-day Spiritual Fitness Challenge for those who are interested. And then we can go into details at the time. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Let's just take a moment to center. And introspection, meditation is highly recommended. Even modern studies show that it is good for our health, both mental and physical health as well. Our cells actually respond to our inward lookingness and calmness when we're able to look beyond the chatter of the mind and not be affected by it. So let's try it. One of the ways we can do that is sitting up a little straighter than we were a second before. It brings the mind to attention. And then close your eyes and bring your attention to your breath. And then just notice that as you breathe, it helps to regulate your mind. Something I tend to forget throughout the day when I'm in the midst of deadlines and getting things done. What about the breath, which I cannot do without for very long? And if we keep bringing our attention back to our breath and focus there, then we can leave behind any of the other concerns and just practice noticing that you're breathing. You might not have been noticing that a moment beforehand. And relax, but keep your mind alert. And then bring the element of gratitude. It's not artificial. It's our nature to feel gratitude. It's actually we're being supplied, for instance, right now with oxygen. If you think of it as a gift, that's a perspective, and you feel some gratitude for it, you'll notice that that changes your ability or improves your ability to stay in the moment. You just be grateful for your breath. And breathe and relax and keep your mind alert. And there's a word in Sanskrit, Vishvambar, 3 syllables, Vishvambar. And it's a mantra that indicates that we're actually being nourished at every moment. We're getting breath. Our digestion is working for us. Intelligence is coming to us as if there were a teacher in the room who's passing down some good instruction. What to speak of our environment? Sun energy is everywhere, nourishing plants, providing a bounty of foodstuffs available for every living being. This is Vishvambar, the awareness that the universe is intentionally nourishing us. So as you're breathing, this is a form of meditation called mantra meditation. I'll say the syllables Vishvambar. And you can bring your mind, that very subtle instrument, to the 3 syllables as I repeat them. Vishvambar. 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 And notice that you're sitting and that you're aware that you're sitting here right now and that you're okay. The mind oftentimes presents a narrative that maybe sometime in the future you won't be okay, and I identify with that the way I might a movie, and then I feel maybe I'm not okay. But at every instant, in every instant, I'm okay. Think about Vishvambar, the nourisher. I'm being supplied at every moment, nourished. So is the world. And in this moment, I'm okay. And bring your attention back to your breath. And then rub your hands together to bring some energy to your external body. And open your eyes and come back into the room. And now I'm going to show a few slides. I promised you some lessons that were passed down. They've been passed down from antiquity. The first is this. It's a perspective. Okay, good. Very powerful perspective on the world. And that is, everything that happens to us is meant to refine our consciousness. Everything that happens to us is meant to refine our consciousness. Let's just come back into the gallery for a second and talk about it. When there are reversals in our life, it may seem difficult to accept something like that. However, with practice, or with that intention that everything that happens is a lesson, it's meant for my refinement. I like the word refinement because we are very subtle beings. Of course, we are not our physical bodies, nor are we our psychological or mental bodies, according to the wisdom texts. We're sentient, we're conscious energy. Conscious energy is different from physical energy. We're called metaphysical. We're beyond the material realm. We're in a body, we're not the body. Body's a vehicle that we're traveling in. We're having an experience of the body. In fact, this is known as wisdom in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the wisdom texts, which designates us as we are called in Sanskrit. Interesting, because the word is cognated with an English word, kshetra gya. So gya, if you trace it in the etymological dictionary, comes out in the modern, what we use as know, to know something is gya. So kshetra means, interestingly, a field. So the body is called a field, and we are called the gya, or the knower of the field. It's not that we are the field, but we know the field. So we're traveling in a body, and yoga and meditation, and incidentally, yoga doesn't mean just meditation. It means a lifestyle of refinement, refining the way we live. So we're surrounding ourselves by higher energies. So our minds become clear, and we practice also doing work. Work is part of yoga as well. Work with a higher intention. This is a way to become self-realized according to the wisdom text. And when we do, we realize our subtle nature beyond the body. We're not just a physical body, not even a mental body, but we're the gya, the knower behind these physical entities, which sometimes I like to describe as the body and mind working together, software, hardware. We're the user. The body really is a very complicated, or I should say, sophisticated biomechanical robot with levers and pulleys and pumps. And our mind really is a very sophisticated series of algorithms using subtle energy to run all that machinery. So we're the user behind it. The wisdom texts say, use every instance in your life, all the various interactions that you have to refine, understand that you are not matter, but you are something much higher than matter, conscious energy. So refinement. There's much more to be said about that, but let's look at a few more lessons and then we'll take some reflections. So the first principle is called DSI, or deliberate spiritual intelligence. So this is an intentionality, which is I perceive the lesson in everything that happens to me. So this is a practice. And I've spoken about this before, actually asking the question, what is the lesson, rather than why me? You know, the difference. Why me? I didn't deserve this. That's a natural reaction that I might have to reversals. However, if I ask a different question, what's the lesson? What's the lesson? What's the lesson? It's very hard to say. I understand that when something is going against my will, against my plan, and to say, what's the lesson? What's the lesson? Is difficult, but it's a very high practice. And it brings me to the purpose of the world, and that is that everything is meant to refine my consciousness. So what about this is meant to refine me? So that's the aim. That's the way to keep the mind aligned with the higher purpose of life, is to continually ask that question. Now, here's a couple of, I know there's a lot of texts on these next slides, so bear with me. I'm going to read them to you. These are from some of the wisdom texts. The SB 11.7.20 is a reference to a Sanskrit work. This is a translation of it and a story that I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. So, intelligent persons, expert in perceiving the world around them and applying sound logic, can achieve real benefit through their own intelligence. Thus, sometimes such persons act as their own instructing gurus. In Sanskrit, guru means heavy. It means somebody who's heavy with knowledge. So, if we take up the process of refinement, our purpose is to discover a higher nature, then we can achieve real benefit just by observing what happens to us in this world. And the next, this is about the Avaduta Brahman. Let me give a little background before I read this quote. Okay, so the story is, and this comes from one of the ancient literatures called Srimad Bhagavatam. There was a king named Yadu, and he was riding through a forest, a wilderness area, actually, with his retinue. They were traveling, and he came across an enlightened sage. He sat down with the sage, showed him respect, as was the custom, and then asked him many questions about self-realization. He was so impressed with the stature of this personality. He asked him, did the king, how did you become enlightened? And the sage, whose name was Avaduta, which actually means one who doesn't have any attachment to the world, said, well, I have all my teachers here. My gurus are here with me in this wilderness. And the king, a little bit amazed at this, looked around and said, excuse me, sir, but I don't see anybody but you here. Who are these gurus? Then systematically, the Avaduta began to speak about his gurus, which happened to be the various, they happen to be 24 various instances in nature or in interaction with other, what may seem to be common instances in life, through which he, in his refined intelligence, was able to take in a lesson that edified him. So that's the context of these lessons that are coming in. I've only picked a few of them today because there are 24 altogether in his teachings. So here's a few of them. And first of all, let's hear the rest of the text. The Avaduta said, I don't consider the 24 elements of the physical world as objects of my sense gratification. Therefore, I don't accept or reject them. Rather, I accept them as my instructing gurus. Thus, although I wander throughout the material world, I am never bereft of service to the guru. I take shelter of steady intelligence. Just pointing out in the first clause, I don't consider the 24 elements of the physical world as objects of my sense gratification. So maybe the language is a little peculiar here, but I'll unpack it. This classification of 24 elements is something that comes from the wisdom text called Sankhya. Sankhya means to count. So there's a way of analyzing the world, of course we do in modern physics, and they would analyze the different categories of energies. And according to different sages, there are different ways of categorizing them. For instance, in Bhagavad Gita, an ancient wisdom text, it's mentioned in Sanskrit, Bhumir Apo Analo Vayu Kammano Pudire Vacha Ahankara Ityame Binna Prakritirashtra. That's a list of gross and subtle material elements, catalog. And sometimes these are divided into 24 elements. It depends how you wish to classify. And that would be earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego on the short list. So these are 24 elements of the physical world. We are beyond the physical world. And he said, I don't see them as objects of sense gratification. You can go back to objects of sense gratification means I'm not looking at them as I want to control them, that these are mine. And this is a phenomena that is mentioned in yogic texts, that there are two different ways of looking at the world. Well, actually three. But one of them is looking at it and thinking that this is mine and I'm going to control it. And how can I make it bend to my will? And the other is looking, what is the lesson behind them? And we'll go a little bit more into why the first worldview is a little more frustrating than the second. Okay. And then the Avaduta in relationship, he says, everyone considers certain things within the material world to be most dear to him or her. And because of attachment to such things, one eventually becomes miserable. One who understands this gives up material possessiveness and attachment and thus achieves unlimited happiness. So a couple things. It is not advocating here. The wisdom texts don't advocate giving up possessions, but they do advocate giving up possessiveness. And there's a difference because we need things. Our bodies are things. We need our bodies too. And therefore it's not that nothing impractical is suggested. However, the attitude by which we use these things can be refined. And that's what the lessons will show. So now let's just take a short break for some reflections. And before I go into the lessons, because the lessons this is very philosophical, I think, what I said already. It's definitely philosophical, maybe not very, but it is philosophical. For instance, if someone hits my car, I'll to overcome the pain of loss, I'll say, oh, it's just a car. That's philosophy. I'm taking a higher perspective. So we've had a little philosophy from the Avaduta before I go into the lessons, which are very tasty, actually. They're easy to consume because they're idea bridges. But let's see, JM, if anybody's mentioned anything in the chat box. And I want to tell everybody that in this room, it's a safe environment. If you want to unmute at any time and speak up, say what's on your mind, give a reflection, ask a question. It's an open forum. It's not just me giving a monologue. What do we have, JM, so far?
We have one comment from Facebook. Very helpful and uplifting discussion so far.
Well, that's good. Yes, please.
So one point I really liked was how the Avadutas had a different perception. Generally, we look at the world as something that we can try to control and enjoy, but he had a different perspective of what lessons he can learn.
Yeah, that's very, very important. In fact, it's a fulcrum of change for change. I guess we'd say, as I mentioned before, there are three perspectives of the world. My teacher gave me this analogy many years ago, and I find it very useful carrying it around with me. So he described three paths. One is the path of renunciation. Another is the path of enjoyment. And the middle path is the path of service or devotion. So let me describe the three using an analogy that he used to give. Let's just say you're standing in line somewhere and you see somebody drop a $100 bill on the ground. Okay, so three choices. You can pick it up and put it in your pocket. You can just leave it there. Don't even tell them, just walk away. Or you could pick it up, tap the person on the back and say, hey, you dropped this, I'm giving it back. Which do you think is the best? If we were looking from an ethical point of view, what would you say?
Last one.
Last one, give it back.
Yeah.
It does seem kind of nice, doesn't it? So in a relationship to the way we interact with the world, the path of renunciation means a desire causes suffering. Therefore, I'll give up all things and I'll remain aloof from the world. This is, the kind of iconic figure of a yogi sitting in a cave. Although a friend of mine who did live in caves for a little while said sometimes yogis fight over who gets what cave. Sometimes he's even seen in the recent days cell phones up there. So the idea of renouncing the world, walking away from it, I won't touch it, I won't smell it, I won't interact. This is leaving the $100 on the ground. And then the other one, I'm going to pick it up and take it for myself. This is the path of enjoyment. Like this world is just meant for me, and get as much as you can while you can. And this has inherent problems. One of them is that it's not mine. It came from somebody else. And I'm only here temporarily. So the third path is the middle path. And that is, yes, use everything, but for a higher cause. Use it in service. Use things for the welfare of others. Use it for a good cause. Give it back. And so that's the path that's recommended in Bhagavad Gita. Not renouncing, not trying to enjoy it, but actually utilizing it in service. So 3 paths. Thank you for your comment. Let's see if there's any more before I go to the lesson. Yes.
Yeah, Rajiv, you had a comment, a lifestyle of refinement, what a powerful mental model. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. First of all, this example of money, the two end states or polarizing states of renunciation and enjoyment, and then the middle is a very powerful analogy. I'm all about mental models. I wish I could remember all of them, and life would be so much more better. But I think this idea of a lifestyle of refinement is something just like you talked about breathing or forgetting to breathe or focus on breathing. We tend to forget about refinement aspect, the continuous refinement in our lives. I just think that as long as we remember it, we are on a natural progression towards peace and whatever the state of bliss may look like. So thank you for sharing that. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, well, you covered a lot. I really appreciate it. I agree with you about analogies. I think they're the most important. Years and years ago, I was giving a lecture up in Canada somewhere, and there was an old friend of mine watching. He's known to be a bit of a curmudgeon, and you have to brace yourself when you ask for a feedback. But I asked him, he said, okay, pretty good. I said, so any feedback? And he said, always use analogies. Everyone wants to hear analogies, and it is so important. And that's why throughout the wisdom text, there's so many analogies. Because isn't it, Rajiv? You hear it and instantly the lesson goes in. You can connect with it right away.
Correct.
So yeah, I agree with you.
May I share one new analogy that I by accident happened to share with my son, and in the process helped myself
Yes, please.
come to peace, which is that with everything unfolding around us, and by no degree and measure as bad as it is for some people, the life around us has become a bit different, at times unwieldy, and we are unsure of the battles we have to fight and which one to pay attention to and whatnot. So I was a bit stressed, and my son saw that stress in me. But then about an hour later, he saw me in a different mood, which was a bit more upbeat. And he asked me, well, what changed? And I mentioned to him that, sometimes things happening around us are like our backyard gardens. The grass is growing, the mulch is rotting, the trees are overgrowing, and we just have to treat it as such. Even our life, which is
We have to prioritize and attend to them one by one, and not get and accept that this is how a good garden is. It will continue to evolve. That evolution in itself is what gives us pleasure and of sight and pleasure of smells and whatnot. We just have to cultivate it. And that's what life is all about. So, and he liked, so as a 12-year-old, he associated himself with that analogy. And I was so glad I was able to share that with him, because in the process, I also reinforced my stance of looking at life just like my garden. So.
Person after my own heart. In fact, it's my favorite analogy. And for, I don't know, 13 years, I had a blog that was garden analogies because I like them so much. They emerge every day. Thank you, Rajiv. So nice. JM, we've got questions pouring in, and some of them are piercing questions. We better attend to them.
Sure. So we do have Anil, who mentioned your analogy of car accident is nice indeed, based on the 24 material senses mentioned of Avaduta. How are we to deal with it at a practical level? So I think I think some of them will come in the slides, I believe, how to apply those in practical level.
Well, when I mentioned the car accident and then we process it by saying, oh, it was just a car, there isn't a sense in the wisdom literatures that there won't be some frustration in life. In fact, frustration is the doorway to enlightenment. It pushes us actually to beyond our comfort zone. And there is a way, however, to process when we do come in contact with disaster even or frustration in our lives. And so what's practical about that is there's steps that we can take by organizing our life in a particular way so that the lesson gradually is instilled in our heart. We don't push it away. What else? I just surveyed a minute ago and I saw, yeah.
John has a question. John, do you want to maybe ask the question that you had?
Yes, I'll preface this as it's just the way I think and how I ask these questions. But in that example you gave of the $100 and the 3 options, when we say ethically, the third one is the preferred one. Doesn't that assume that the other person isn't already sort of semi-enlightened? In other words, if the person who lost $100 wasn't attached to the $100, maybe they wouldn't care so much either way, whether you told them or not. And actually, if they weren't attached to it and they felt that you maybe weren't at that stage of consciousness, you might take enjoyment out of the $100. Wouldn't they be happy for you to have it? Because they're not that much attached to it. And I guess the question is, like, when you think about these things, it's all dependent upon like what you assume is the state of everyone else around you and of everything else around you, right? Because if I don't have attachment to things, why do I care one way or the other? It's not a big deal for me if I lost $100, and if maybe it's great that the other person got it because they can use it.
Sure, and you're right. There are limitations in analogies and metaphor also, and we do have to start with a given. So I was starting with a given. I didn't state it; it was tacit that the person would like to have the $100 back. However, even in the case, I would say, John, of a person who was detached and didn't need the $100 bill, if something is given intentionally, in other words, if you just dropped it and then you said, oh, here, you dropped your $100 bills, there would be infinitely more pleasure in such a person's heart to say, oh, no, you keep it. Because it wasn't unconscious activity. It wasn't that it happened as an accident. So that could be considered also. But your point's well taken that these analogies don't always cover every single aspect. They're broad stroke, definitely. And I saw another question there about mutual exclusivity. Do you see that one? That caught my attention. You're on mute, JM.
Sorry. Yeah, Pratik said on follow-up question on this analogy, why not enjoy the life and do service as well? Why is that mutually exclusive?
It's not. And in fact, we, for instance, we live in a body and keeping the body. There's a difference between eating to live and living to eat. This is, again, broad stroke, but the fact is that, if I'm living to give to others, I'm living. And there is a kind of enjoyment there. One could argue there's a more refined type of enjoyment, because don't we say, it's almost cliche to say happiness comes from within. When I was writing my first book, there was I was looking into this topic about, is it better to give or receive? The perennial question. And there was a survey, I think, of 20,000 Canadian college students, and they were just asked a simple question: is it better to give or receive? And 99%, I don't know what happened to the other 1%, said, yeah, better to give than to receive. It just seemed kind of intuitive. And so on one side, there is a kind of enjoyment that happens on an inner level when we're living a life of service. And by giving, we grow. Actually, we become bigger. By trying to hold on to things and claiming that they're mine, proprietorship, these are my things and I will control them. We can't control things. They always come out of our grasp. I was just talking to somebody the other day who had an amazing business and had, since the time he was 16, gotten an amazing education and everything like that. And because of 2 employees in his company breaking the law, he lost everything. And of course, he was a very high-minded person, but he was just noting how these things slipped out of his fingers no matter how hard he tried. So there is a way in which we can interact with the things of the world. They're gonna come and go anyway. But if we use them for a higher purpose, then we get an augmented inner satisfaction that we don't get necessarily when we just try to enjoy them in a tactile way, or in a way in which we're trying to commandeer them or control them. JM, there's tons more on the board there, but let's go to some of the lessons, because they're so sweet, I think, and that everyone will enjoy them, and then we can come back for the last points. So this is one of the lessons that the Avaduta learned. One day when he was sitting in the wilderness, he noticed there was this altercation going on, and there was a Karari hawk, a small hawk, and it was carrying away a mouse. And 2 larger hawks assailed the smaller hawk and said, give it up or die. And the smaller hawk let go of the mouse. And that's it. That's the lesson. Drop the mouse. So there are oftentimes circumstances that come into our lives that are beyond our control. We're being crushed by them and so forth. There are ways in which this lesson might apply to us. That is, drop the mouse, let it go. I'm not saying there aren't some things worth fighting for, but internally, if we let go and we understand I'm not the controller of these things, I'll do my duty, but I'm not the controller, and we let go of proprietorship over certain things, then they no longer have a grip on us. There was an old story from India. There are a lot of monkey analogies. There are parts of India I've lived where there are lots of monkeys, and they're endlessly fascinating to watch. A story I heard, I've never seen such a thing, but sometimes I've heard this story. There's a monkey, there's a clay pot, and they would put some fruits inside the pot. And the monkey would put his hand in the pot to grab the fruits, and then the person would go to catch the monkey. And the monkey couldn't get away with the pot on his hand, but he wouldn't let go of the fruit inside either. And so this was an analogy given to express this conundrum that I'm holding on to certain things and I can't get away from them, that just let go. So this was a lesson that he expressed to the king, that he learned that there are certain things, if I practice letting them go, then I free myself. And it's up to me. I can analyze, is it worth holding on to the mouse? I'm going to get killed for this. Just let it go. There's more mice out there if you're a hawk. I'm not advocating killing mice, by the way. Okay. The next one he saw was the arrow maker. And one day, when he happened to be on a rare occasion, he had walked through a village where there had been a parade. And in the parade, there were dancers and flame swallowers and jugglers and bands playing. And alongside the pathway in the town, there was an arrow maker. And after the parade had gone by, a colleague of the arrow maker said to him, did you see the parade? And the arrow maker said, no, what parade? And he said, oh, it just came by here. And he said, oh, I missed it. Why? Because he was so focused on making the arrow straight. He has full absorption. So the second lesson, or a second lesson that the Avaduta taught, was about the power of focus. I picked out this quote from Bruce Lee, who said, the successful warrior is an average person with laser-like focus. So it's one of the gifts of our consciousness, or we can give ourselves the gift of focus by practice. I like to say focus is nectar, distraction is torture. And in today's world, there's a lot of different ways that we can become distracted. And not just in today's world, the mind has, if it's untrained, if it's not practiced at focusing, then it can be darting constantly in awakened states and also in sleeping. Lesson from the ocean. There are multiple lessons, but one of them is to remain equipoised in loss or gain. So in this story, he saw that the rivers in the rainy season are pouring into the ocean from all sides, thousands and thousands of rivers, but the ocean stays the same. And in the dry season, no rivers are coming in and the ocean is still the same. And so the lesson, as we'll hear from literatures like Bhagavad Gita and many other wisdom literatures, the idea of remaining equipoised. Whatever is coming or not coming, loss or gain, victory or defeat, fame or infamy, stay the same. How is that possible? By not identifying with the life situation that's going on around me, noticing it, being the witness of it and watching. They're two sides of the same coin. So those who are equipoised, they realize the lesson behind it. They don't become carried away by it. For instance, the loss. I heard Steve Jobs's lecture at Stanford for it was a graduation, in which he talked about the most significant learning experiences in his life. Maybe he put it even more epically, that these were the most important instances in his life. And they were all about loss. One of them was when he got he was shown the door from his own company. He started it. It was his idea. He and Stephen Wozniak, and they started in Steve Jobs' father's garage, and then developed it. And then at a certain time, he's like, "Okay, you're out." Out is my company. And he said that was a huge loss for him. He thought, I'm finished. In fact, during the Great Depression, there were people who financially they lost so much, and they identified with their balance, bank balance, so much that they committed suicide because it's like, I'm finished. So there's this idea that I am my things, and when they're gone, I'm gone. But the person who's aloof, who learns the process of witnessing and seeing how loss, gain, victory, defeat, they're all just movements in my life. And how am I taking the lessons from them? Isn't disturbed by them. Such an equiposition is possible for those who practice. And then the Avaduta gave the lesson of the moth. Moths, and not just moths, but a lot of insects fly into dangerous lights. Here's a moth flying into a flame. Don't be enchanted by temporary wealth, is what he learned. What you are is more important than what you have. So it relates to what I just said about accumulation and thinking that all these things I have to have, and they actually become a sense of, they can lead to my, the demise of my consciousness and the refinement of my consciousness. Lesson from the honey badger he learned, and that is whatever you have is what you have to lose. So the honey badger lets the bees develop a honeycomb over many, many weeks and months, hard labor, and then he walks in and takes the whole thing and just eats it. So he was aware of the fact that the honey thief is there. Don't think that whatever you have now won't be apprehended or taken by somebody else. And the river. You can't step in the same river twice. Your body really is a river. It looks like one thing, but it's constantly in flux. It's made mostly of water. There are some chemicals, some calcium and other items that if when all the water is gone from your body, you get about a shoebox full of what looks like dirt. I know this because I've taken a lot of people's ashes to the Ganges and put them in there for their families or for them, as they've requested me. So I go to India regularly. Those chemicals are worth about $2.52, although I don't think you can get that much on eBay or anywhere else for that box of chemicals. The river looks like one thing, you name it one thing, but it's actually in flux constantly, and so is the body. The implication is we're not. We're the witness of the body, we're the Kshetragya. And the river also is transitory in the sense that it's just passing through, and so are we. We're only passing through this life. This is, if I consider it my final destination and I try to stay here, I will be sorely disappointed. But if I understand that I'm only passing through here and picking up lessons as I go, as I pass through very, in this ephemeral nature that I'm involved with, then it's edifying, it's calming. It gives me a center of perspective, a centered perspective. And finally, the musk deer. He learned from the musk deer. The musk deer has a gland that emanates a scent that is practically intoxicating. However, and of course, this is mythology, the idea that the deer doesn't know where it's coming from. It just knows that I want to find the source of that beautiful scent, the musk. And so it goes up mountains and down into valleys and searches everywhere. Where is the scent? Not knowing that it's coming from his own navel. And so then the Avaduta explains that actually what we're looking for is already within us. Our consciousness and our conscious connection to our source is actually the source of happiness. That's what yoga means, huge, to connect, reconnect with our original conscious source. And when we do that, doesn't matter where we are. You don't have to go anywhere, actually. You can be anywhere and be fully satisfied, because what you are is more important than what you have. What you are is something that's non-neural, non-temporal, and which is metaphysical, and which is full of light. The only reason I'm not experiencing it is because I'm looking somewhere else. So the process of looking inwardly and organizing my life in such a way that I can experience my higher self is worthwhile. Now, JM, I saw one other piercing question over there, although
Yeah.
there may be more, but let's take them if we can.
Sure. So Wolf asked, are the ancient texts are the only source of wisdom? It seems that was a time of enlightenment while we are descending into darkness of dumb times. Please share your opinion.
Well, as this section of the wisdom literatures points out, if you refine your intelligence, you'll actually become a guru to yourself. I mean, that's the idea of the Avaduta Brahman, because he was in this state of consciousness where he was taking the lesson from his environment. He was actually well guided at every moment. And obviously, wisdom abounds. Human beings are capable of very high thinking in every culture. Wherever there is that high thinking, there's an accumulation of wisdom, and it's self-effulgent. If you look through and you see in various cultures, no matter where they might be, that people were thinking deeply about the purpose of life, they'll come up, whatever culture it is, they come up with very similar kinds of observations that are very deep and guiding. So wisdom is where we find it, just like gold. Gold is gold, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. The real question about gold is, what is its carat? In other words, how pure is it? So we're looking for usually 24 karat gold, not 12. I saw in Hawaii, I used to spend some time there. In Hawaii, they sell these chains, gold chains that were 12 karat gold. And, after people bought them, about a week later, swimming in the ocean, they would turn green because they had so many other alloys within them. So we're looking for the purest kind of knowledge we can that relates to kind of an unmotivated, uninterrupted lifestyle of connection to our spiritual self and the source of ourself. Wolf always has such great questions, and I hope that answered that properly. And if you're here, Wolf, still, and it didn't, feel free to elaborate. Go ahead, J.M.
D. Chauvin says, often I struggle with the lifestyle of refinement, choice against letting someone get away with something, and perhaps I should not. I ask myself if I'm just burying my head in the sand, so to speak. It's that choice of picking battles. Am I just conflict avoider, or am I truly living in alignment with my philosophy?
Well, I can relate. I'm conflict avoidant myself. And I think picking battles is really important because we only have so much energy in our days and our lives. And the idea of a lifestyle of refinement is organizing, as I've used that phrase several times now in this one talk, organizing our lives around being in contact with others who are practicing, who are high-minded. That's very helpful. And also fortifying ourselves before we interact with the world, so that when things do come up, then we're able to process them in a way that we get the lesson out of them. If I just charge out into the world without any fortification, and if I'm not able to adjust my attitude before I deal with the world in its complexities and its absurdities, actually. I mean, there's so many inexplicable things going on in the world all the time, especially nowadays, almost. It seems like, I don't know, maybe it's always the same. But without developing that perspective, for myself, I always feel like once I've centered myself, especially with a morning practice, then throughout the day, I feel I'm able to accommodate these things and actually understand them better and deal with them. But it is an ongoing process. JM, since we've come to the end here, and it was a quick ride, and there's a lot still on the board. Hopefully we can preserve that and answer them in the future. we also wanted to just mention the connection to the 21-day fitness challenge, because there's a lot of new people on the Zoom today. Do you want to give a really quick explanation of that?
Sure.
Because it's practical.
Yeah. So as Vash mentioned, we do have 21-day spiritual fitness challenge, and I'll give you the link. So basically, there are activities which you can do on a daily basis related to body, mind, and spirit, which helps you lead a healthy and well-balanced life. So there are very basic. The descriptions are available in the web page for body, mind, and spirit, as I mentioned. And there is a tracker as well. So if you want to participate, you can just go and submit your progress online on a daily basis, and then keep up to date with it. And there are others also participating. So this way you can build those habits which are described. So I'll put the link on the Zoom and potentially give more detailed description next time. But I just want to quickly flash the 21-day spiritual fitness challenge. Anything more you want to add?
No, I think that's sufficient. One of the practices is mantra meditation, and it is a way that you can use the power of sound vibration, sometimes described as a spiritual formula, a spiritual algorithm, so to speak, to keep the mind centered. And well, I'll give the example that if you use ultrasound, you can see what's within the physical body. If you use sonar, you can see what's in the ocean. If you use mantra, then you can perceive your higher self beyond the body and mind. That's the idea. Sound vibration is revealing. So that is a practice that we highly recommend. Let's finish with just a little bit of mantra. So mantra meditation means to repeat the mantra and listen to the sound vibration. So you yourself make the vibration with your vocal cords and tongue, and then you focus your mind on the sound. We started today's session by focusing on breath. And when you listen to the sound and keep bringing your mind back to it, you'll notice that you have an anchor. So the first mantra first and only mantra for today is a two-part mantra. It has two words, Nitai and Gauranga. And it's spelled out on this slide that JM's going to show in just a second. And the practice, mantra meditation, is much like we, as I said, did earlier. But I will say the syllables in the mantra with this drone in the background, and then behind muted mics, you can repeat. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us in this 1 hour presentation, 1 hour and 3 minutes. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. And please check out Spiritual Fitness. There are some parameters there that help to stay in the practice. And Wolf, I know I owe you some Alan Watt explanation. I promised you like 3 months ago. So I will get to it out of gratitude for your presence here. And everyone else, thank you very, very much. Great to meet you, Rajiv, and everyone else who joined us today. Some had to drop off a few minutes ago. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And see you next week. Now, we've been ending the session by everyone unmuting. There's an old saying in Sanskrit. Yogis say this to each other. It means keep the vibration going. That's a kind of paraphrase. It goes like this: Hari Bol, Hari Bol. So Hari Bol. So if everyone can unmute and just say Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Hari Bol. See you next time.
Thank you.